As a kid, the family and stuff, we always did stuff outdoors. It was just a natural thing. It was an opportunity that came, and then it's the business, the industry is just infectious. You know, if you're in it, you understand it. It's a great industry to be in from the industry point of view. It's a bit more challenging from a retail point of view. I think the nicest bit about working in retail is talking to customers. We call it in the office, we need to get our shop fix. Outdoor customers are infectious. I mean, I've been told quite a lot by both my family and my team that I don't have enough time off. I encourage everybody to take the time and do as I say, not as I do, so to speak. I think the thing that you have to think most is that
in this Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode, I chat with Lee Bagnall, CEO of Go Outdoors and Black's Leisure Group, otherwise known as JD Outdoors. Lee has over 30 years of experience in retail, of which more than half has been in the outdoor industry. We talk about the challenges of moving from a private to a public business, the key success factor in retail, and much, much more. Before we get into the episode, I do have one favour to ask. Less than 50% of people watching or listening are subscribed, so please hit the subscribe or follow button to help us reach more people so that they can also benefit from the valuable insights leaders like Lee share. I hope you enjoy the episode. If you do, please don't forget to like and leave a comment. So Lee, for the last 30 years you've been in retail, so I think kind of over that period it splits between three industries somehow, kind of furniture, DIY, and obviously now outdoor. But focusing first more on the retail, why retail? What kind of got you into retail in the first place?
family furniture business.
Okay.
So my father was always in retail. Owned a furniture store in Stoke-on-Trent, quite a large one. So as a kid, I always used to go at the weekend, used to go and do deliveries during school holidays and that type of thing. So yeah, been in it for life really.
And then what about, as I mentioned, there's those three kind of phases or three industries throughout your career. What brought you to the outdoors? Has the outdoors or sport kind of always been a part of your life when you were a kid growing up, or was it just kind of was happenstance?
I think as a kid, the family and stuff, we always did stuff outdoors, but never really thought about it much. It was just a natural thing. You know, you'd be outside, you'd be camping, you'd be scouts, you'd be all that type of thing. So it wasn't something that I thought, I must go into the outdoor trade. It was something that actually I sort of fell across it really. It was an opportunity that came, and then it's the business, the industry is just infectious. You know, if you're in it, you understand it. Whatever you do, it's just part of your life, and it's a great industry to be in. It's from the industry point of view, it's a bit more challenging from a retail point of view. But there's nobody that's in the outdoor industry, and you'll know this, that isn't it's their life in general. So I got into it by accident, and I was lucky enough to join Go Outdoors in its infancy. Yeah. And I worked for the founders of Go Outdoors, John and Paul, and John was just infectious. You know, the whole business, and anybody that's been out with Go Outdoors a long time will tell you, you know, if you worked either with John or for John, it wasn't an option that you didn't do stuff outdoors and you didn't know about stuff. He used to go around the stores regularly and just train the staff. And you know, there's loads of people in the business now that have been with the business 20 years. And the Black's business, there's people that's been with the business 40 years. We've retired. You know, there's people retiring from the Black's business every year. You know, and they've been with the business from 16 and 17. So it's a long time. And I think once people get into it, if they're into the outdoors, they never get out.
Yeah. That's a good observation for sure. And when you joined Go Outdoors, was it Go Outdoors already, or was it still CCC? Because I met John a couple of times in the early stages of my career, and that was still CCC then. But
it was both. Okay. So at the time I joined, there was 3 Go Outdoors, and CCC was still called CCC. Okay. And we were just about to change Mitchell's in Wakefield from Mitchell's Practical Campers to Go Outdoors in Wakefield. So we'd just changed the name of the store in Oxford from Touchwood Sports to Go Outdoors. Yeah. So it was at that time when actually Go Outdoors was going to be the predominant fascia. Yeah. The first store obviously being in Coventry, and it never really looked back from there. Really, I can remember going to the store on a bank holiday Monday prior to joining the business, and it was just mobbed with customers, and that's when I knew the business had got something.
So going back though to those early days working in your family business, that step into retail was somehow obvious, but did you already have in mind at that point that, okay, retail is going to be my career, in however many years, I want to be leading a business? Or was that kind of roadmap already in your mind?
I think the nicest bit about working in retail is talking to customers. There's nothing quite, we call it in the office, we need to get our shop fix. Yeah. And we have to get out into the stores. We sometimes, when you're running a business, you sometimes don't spend enough time in stores. And I still don't do that now through varying different reasons and pressures. But if you ever have a few bad days, you can soon fix that by doing a few days in stores and talking to the teams, but mainly the customers. Generally outdoor customers are infectious. They're there to do something for their life, and therefore they're pretty happy about what they're buying. They're inquisitive. They ask lots of questions. The most asked question in Go Outdoors is which regulator do I need for my gas bottle? That's the most asked question, believe it or not. Really? So that's the first question we train at everybody who joins Go Outdoors. Which gas regulator do you need for which gas bottle?
From the early days, you've worked for, let's say, lots of different types of retail in terms of ownership. So private ownership from family, and then with CCC. But you've also worked with public companies. So obviously within the JD Group today, I guess B&Q was publicly owned. It was Kingfisher, right?
Kingfisher, Woolworths at first, but Kingfisher had got Comet. Big W at the time, and it was a real big business. Joined there from having spent 5 years at Wickes, and I spent a lot of the time at Wickes and the major ticket purchases, which is sort of coming from the family business. We sold kitchens, so I joined B&Q many years ago. Yeah. And it was a big business, but it was a thriving business. They were rolling out the B&Q warehouse format. They were changing from being a red store to an orange store at the time. They were, when I joined, there were 50, well, not quite 50-50. There were 70% stores were red, and the warehouses were about 30% at the time. And they were orange. They were originally red, and then they basically changed them to orange so that it was a protection from Home Depot in the States. That was the reason it was done originally. Very exciting time. I was lucky enough to do lots of different jobs in B&Q, and they spent lots of money on their people, lots of people development. So I was lucky to work for a business that invested in me and invested in its people. So I got a lot of money spent on me by B&Q. So thank you, B&Q. And it was an exciting time. There was change in everything because the business was growing so fast. There was rapid change, and there was lots of opportunities. And if you wanted to take opportunities, they were there for you. So I worked in the north. I worked in the south. I worked in the centre. I worked in the home improvement side, the kitchen side. I worked in their retail side. So I ran B&Q's biggest store in Reading at the time. So, the opportunities were there, but it was a tough business. Work hard and play hard was B&Q all over, really. Yeah. And I worked with, one of the things that B&Q did, they got you to work for different people. So they sort of passed you around as part of your development. And so you'd work for somebody that was very structured, and you worked with somebody that was really people orientated, and you worked for somebody that was really driven. So I was lucky enough to work for all those different people, and you generally pick the best of those things as part of you, and you try your very best to emulate the best of those in what you do, albeit that's not always possible, is it? But
yeah, no, for sure. And any reflections on how did you feel like you had to adapt yourself in the way you were leading and the way you were running business between working with a privately owned company versus a publicly owned? Because obviously the requirements and the pressures could be somehow different.
There's definitely a difference in terms of who you work for and how you are. And going back in the day with B&Q, it was because it was a fast-growing business, but it was still a publicly listed business. It was still part of a publicly listed business. It was still part of Kingfisher. So they had quite a good people department. They were driven around the people was everything to B&Q. As you move through your career, you have to adapt. And I actually think times have changed a little bit as well. So I think it's a lot different now than it was 25 or 30 years ago. And obviously for the better. We're much more open about the way we are and who we are and what we say and what we do. And sometimes back then, I don't think people thought about that in the same way.
And one of the other, probably the biggest change within retail over that period has obviously been moving from most retailers were either purely physical and maybe with some mail order, and then of course there were some larger mail order businesses, to now, with the digital channel playing a key part with pretty much every retailer, hopefully every retailer. How have you personally been able to kind of continue to develop yourself and keep up with that change? Because the change in that 30 years has been, well, I mean, you tell me, it must have been dramatic.
The guy that was running B&Q at the time was a guy called Martin Toogood. And Martin was great at strategy and he was great at looking forward. At the time, they bought a business called Screwfix. Yeah. And Screwfix sold screws. It was an online-only retailer. And effectively, the web, when it got bought, everybody was sort of scratching their heads and thought, why have we bought this little online retailer? We're the biggest in DIY. The secret behind Screwfix is it wasn't actually a business that was evolved around screws. It was a technology business that decided to sell screws and fastenings, and therefore the whole operation was developed around the infrastructure. And at the time, we all knew that it was coming. And B&Q's website, DIY.com, was bought because an American person bought B&Q.co.uk and B&Q.com and tried to ransom the website. So Martin Toogood got DIY.com, and everybody knows DIY.com is B&Q, and therefore that was always going to be part of the thing that was coming. I don't think anybody at the time realised it was going to be so big so quick. I mean, it's still relatively young, isn't it, in terms of what it was. I think Go Outdoors, for me, Paul Kaplan was spent quite a lot of time in the States, and he was a big driver behind Go Outdoors website. Okay. And the things that you could do on the websites in the States. He'd come back, back in the day, really early on in Go Outdoors time. Go Outdoors had reserve and collect, way before most other retailers. Yeah, and it was something that started off at the time with a very few small number of customers. We had a lot of cage behind the tills in the stores, and the store would get the order through. It would come through, you'd print it off, you'd pick the order and let the customer know by text from the individual stores. Very much string and sellotape in terms of doing it, but it was amazing. It's still 15% of our orders are still done by reserve and collect in the same way as they were back then.
Okay, interesting. And so for you, has it been about working with and bringing in the right people, the kind of the experts in that digital area, and giving them the ownership, or is it something that you're particularly interested in, that more digital side of the business?
Listen, I love that side of the business, but with any particular part of your business, the best thing to do is bring the expertise in. So we're sort of always trying to strive and drive forward with technology. Our biggest challenge is we're part of a £10 billion business, and therefore getting stuff changed from a technology point of view is challenging and difficult to get that stuff done. But the reality is that JD as a group, over 4,000 stores worldwide. It's a robust system and process, and therefore, sometimes you're always going to be second to the beast that is JD, albeit that JD is going through a whole change in terms of platform and system change at the moment, because obviously stuff moves on. It moves on quick. So I mean, it's an exciting place to be, isn't it? I think the thing that surprised most people is the fact that I think everybody thought that shops were dead and they were finished, and that's just not the case. We've seen the web business reset itself into the same trajectory as it had before, and the strongest businesses in retail are the ones that have got both formats, where the customer can choose the way they want to shop, how they want to shop, and the order they want to shop. And the customers that spend most are the ones that shop across all channels, and therefore they're the ones that are the ones that are most precious to you. So you have to be good at serving them in stores and online, because they don't differentiate between the two.
You spoke earlier about your time at B&Q, that the people aspect was really important about that business, and they invested a lot in you and of course others in terms of developing them. So how do you see that today? Is that something that you try and replicate or have your own version of today within Go Outdoors and within Blacks?
Yeah, we have sort of two sort of places for that. We're part of the JD group and the JD people team. So JD do an awful lot around developing their people, so we get the benefit of being within the group. We also do a lot around developing our own people, both store-based, office-based, and leadership. So we regularly take the leadership team, and when I say the leadership team, the wider leadership team, we take them away and talk about strategy. We talk to them about how we deliver stuff. So I can remember sitting a few years ago with some of the leadership team, and we were talking during one of these sessions that we, as an executive board member, one of us would go to each of the sessions and talk to the team as part of the development. And I sort of reflected back with the team about the opportunities that had with B&Q and the money they spent, and a question got asked to me, well, what happens if you spend the money and they leave? And I think it was Richard Branson and his finance director once said, what happens if we don't invest them and they stay? So I always laugh at that quote because it's it's so true, isn't it? What happens if they invest and they leave? Well, that's because they've got a career of their own, and if you haven't got the opportunities, then if they're that good, they will move on. A little bit different in the outdoor trade, because it is so infectious and there's not lots of places to go in terms of if you want to stick within the industry. So
I mean, this room is I think a good example that shows that you kind of live by that and investing the teams today, because this is, I believe, is the training room, and as everybody can see with the different camera angles, it's a great space and a really nice environment for people to learn.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges with it all is that it's holding yourself to that on a day-by-day basis, because we all know when we get under pressure, we revert to type. I'm one of these people that drives hard and is fairly direct, and sometimes you have to sort of wind that back, and you have to sort of give yourself a slap in the face and say, look, this is the best way to be. So it's a challenge to be like that all the time. It's a challenge to be like that for all the right reasons. The big thing we've got is we've got passion in our business, and what with passion comes sometimes that clash. We like to be one team, but when you're passionate about a view, you do get that sort of challenge between one another. But generally, when we leave the room and we've agreed, and we operate as a unit and together. As difficult as that is for the ones of us that sometimes want to do something else, Sure.
But I think that's the critical part of any leadership team. It's once you leave that room, that you're all aligned, and whether we agree or not with that decision. I think in 2013 you joined Blacks as CEO, Blacks Leisure Group, I should say, as CEO, and since then, Blacks has obviously acquired, a few different specialist retailers in different niches. What have you kind of learned through that process? That must be a pretty interesting and quite exciting time and opportunity to learn. So I'm interested to know kind of what have been your key takeaways from that.
I suppose the key takeaways is there are certain different customer types, and therefore certain different customer types shopping, and even though a lot of the product is the same, there's elements either higher up the mountain or lower down the mountain, if you want to use that as an analogy, where customers have their preferred retailer. The biggest challenge in the outdoor industry is that the customer they're not overly loyal, and therefore they'll shop either their easiest location. The service element is not, when you do the surveys, then it's not top of the agenda. It's generally around price, and therefore that's been a real challenge because effectively the exclusivity of product is the thing that really helps drive that business. So the challenge we have is that the market is oversubscribed. Really, it's now got the same number of stores it had when it had just Blacks and Millets back in the day. It's just split into different segments. So Blacks and Millets lost its way, and therefore, the Go Outdoors and the Cotswolds of the world came and ate its lunch. And now you've got the likes of Mountain Warehouse and Regatta that have opened great shops where they've got their own product at higher margins, and therefore they're also doing a great job. So I think the challenge is for us is we've just got to have great product at great prices with great people, and I think if you've got that combination, then you're always going to do okay.
Those acquisitions, it was about appealing to enabling you to kind of appeal and attract to a broader range then of consumers.
Yeah, I think the thing about Go Outdoors, which is unique, is it goes right from a dog walker right up to the top of a mountain. And that's because of the size and the scale of the business, that's the sort of thing that nobody else can do. You need big space in order to be able to offer right from the a quarter fleece at under a tenner to a stretch fleece from some of the big brands, that are £100. And therefore you would not normally mix those consumers up, but we do, and we do it in quite a successful way. And I think that, if you want a piece of kit, the chances are we're going to have it. Yeah. And that is it in any of the arenas that we play in, and we play in a lot of arenas, as you know. So,
in addition to your, let's say, full-on daytime job as CEO of Go Outdoors and Blacks, you also sit on a couple of boards in non-exec roles. So how do you find that balance between that and also having a life outside of work as well? Is there anything that you do to make sure you maintain a healthy balance? So,
I've been told quite a lot by both my family and my team that I don't have enough time off. So I suppose, I encourage everybody to take the time and do as I say, not as I do, so to speak. The non-exec stuff is really trying to do stuff for charity. So I was on the air ambulance board for quite a while, the trading company, and I gave that up on the basis that I didn't have time to really give it what I wanted to. But I did it for seven and a bit years. I'm on the advisory committee of the Pennies charity. Pennies is unique in terms of it's not a charity, it's a charity enabler, and it's about people donating pennies, and therefore micro donations is about everybody giving a little. And the pennies charity is just a phenomenal situation. So we use pennies to enable our customers to donate to the JD Foundation. Okay. So therefore, it's a collective of both retail and hospitality. There's 2 advisory boards, and there's lots of people from retail and hospitality on it. And it's really just about trying to do something that's going to give back. It enables you to be able to raise money for your foundation. So in JD's points, the JD Foundation gives money to kids, effectively young kids, and therefore everything it does is about giving money back to children. And we're about to do that, right across the world. At the moment, the JD Foundation is UK based, but they're developing that to go around the world. Going back to doing what I do outside, I ski, I walk, I used to ride quite badly, and I like being outside. I live on a small holding, so I live on a farm, so there's always stuff to do. Yeah. I think doing stuff actually around the place actually is a completely different mindset, and does really help you do physical, not mental. Yeah. I like eating and drinking as well, as you can see from my demeanour. So I'm lucky really, because I've never really, when I've got home, I've always had the ability to switch off when I get home. Yeah. Even however bad the day has been or however bad the week has been, I've always had the ability when I get home to be able to go in and switch off. So I should really take more holiday though, as everybody tells me.
Great. Well, I think you're right that having something like a small holding, something where you have that need to do physical activity, is a great way to disconnect. I mean, we don't have a small holding, but we have a pretty large outdoor space with lots of fruit trees, nut trees, and growing vegetables and some chickens, and so there's always something to do, and I think that's sometimes you wish you didn't have something to do, but a lot of the time it's like, okay, great, I can go and do whatever, and helps disconnect. Yeah. So looking back over your career, who are the people that have been, would you say, kind of key influences on you over your career?
There's been lots of people, I think you can take something from everybody. I think, if I look back at my time at B&Q, I got recruited by a guy called Ralph Cunningham, who was very regimented in the way that he worked. He was very structured. I worked with a guy called Stuart Bogues that was just incredible. He was known as the biggest thanker in the business, and because he was always thanking people and saying thank you and well done. And there's lots of other people in B&Q, by the way. There's a long list of them, but those are the 2 that really stood out. I also worked for a guy called Dean McMillan, who in B&Q that Dean once told me that sometimes it was better to have a good second than a bad first. Yeah. And I didn't really get that back at the time, but sometimes you can win ugly, can't you? So I still think show me a good loser and I'll show you a loser, but the sentiment around the way you get to where you need to get to is sometimes more important than getting there quickly. So that was a pretty decent learning. I worked with the founders of Go Outdoors, John and Paul, completely different characters. John was, just immersed in the outdoor bit, and Paul was he was driven, but very strategic in terms of what he was thinking, and he was always thinking ahead. And obviously, I spent the guts of a decade working for Peter Cowgill, and there's a lot of things that Peter did well, and some that not so. And obviously, I now work for Regis Schultz, who previously I'd sort of with our paths across at B&Q. So all these people have got different skills and different abilities, and I think the secret is to take all the good stuff and try and put it together. And it's not always as easy as it sounds, but yeah. So I've been very, very fortunate to work for some pretty amazing people,
And so, as well as those let's say leaders or managers that you've worked with, have you ever worked with like an external coach, or had somebody that you would consider to be a mentor throughout your career that you've kind of dipped in and out of as you needed to?
We do some work around coaching and mentoring. I say, if I go back to the B&Q days, we were lucky enough to have executive coaches at the time. And what they do is they just give a different view and a different vision. The team still use some people back from the B&Q days. They're helping our executive leadership team now. So they were pretty good at what they did, and they help you look at things from a different angle sometimes, and they're sometimes a pretty decent conscience, I suppose.
Yeah, I think having that outside view though can be pretty useful, because especially I think in our industry, because like you said, once you're in it, you tend to be very committed to it, and sometimes it's tough to stop and step back and kind of look at the big picture.
I think sometimes talking to somebody independent is good, because what you get is you get an unbiased view, and they help keep you honest, don't they? I think sometimes you can get carried away, and sometimes you get off track, and therefore having the ability to talk that through with somebody as an independent party that has nothing to gain either way really helps keep you balanced. I also think having people around you in your work life that you can just bounce things off to, and people that are going to give you the honest view, good or bad, also helps. I'm lucky enough to have a pretty strong executive, and if they've got something to say, they're not scared of, not scared of both telling me and also challenging back. And I think sometimes it's not nice in the time, but if you take time to reflect on some of the stuff, I think it helps keep you balanced.
I get the impression from listening to you that you're pretty competitive. Would you say that's fair? Either that's a laugh like I'm completely wrong, or it's a massive understatement.
I am competitive. It's a challenge, because you have to try and temper that ambition and competitiveness sometimes on the basis that it can get you in the wrong place sometimes. And I've been victim of that. I'll be driving forward. Somebody once said, it was a bit of a funny thing where we were having that debate, and I'd said something like, come on, let's get this done. And the person came back and challenged me and said, look, you're just leaving a trail of dust behind you. And I replied, well, keep up then, and then you won't be in the dust. So it was said in a bit of a flippant way, but having time to reflect on it, that was how me driving and being so competitive had made them feel. And my normal answer to that was, well, just keep up then, and you won't be in the dust. So I've reflected on that quite a few times over the years, and sometimes you just got to take your foot off the gas a little bit, and you will get there faster in the end. But in the moment, it's very difficult to do.
Yeah, that's tough. But I think it's great that you have that kind of self-reflection, that you recognise that. But it's I think, to your point about sometimes when you're in the business and your head's down, it's tough to identify that. And
I think the thing that you have to think most, and sometimes you really do have to sort of tell yourself, is that nobody comes to work to do a bad job. And that applies to everybody that works in the business, but it also applies to me. I don't come to work upset people or piss people off. I come to work to do the very best for the business and us. But sometimes in the moment, that gets sort of gets missed. So my whole thing is that everybody comes to work to do the very best. There are very, very few people. We've got just over 4,000 people in the business. There are very few people that got up this morning and went to work and thought, I'm going to do a really bad job today. I suspect there wouldn't have been any this morning. So I think sometimes you do have to self-reflect, and you have to do that. And it is a challenge, because if you are very competitive, sometimes the mist gets in the way, and therefore you misconstrue stuff that goes on.
Yeah. But that's good if you've got an executive team that are willing and able to also challenge you back.
I'm sure they'll tell you that's not 100% the case, but it is really. I've got a great executive team, a great leadership team. The team are very talented, and it's been a challenging year for us. And I think through times like that, you really do find who's with you and who's not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's an interesting comment, because I think oftentimes, when things are good, when business is good, it can kind of paper over the cracks, and you don't see either your own weaknesses or the business's weakness or other people's weaknesses. Whereas when it's tough, and like you said, everybody needs to pull together, and you realise, I'm not doing this well, or we're not doing that well. It's even though I'm sure we would all prefer it was always nice and business was good, but I think actually challenging times help us also develop and keep pushing forward, for sure. As you said, you're leading a business with now over 4,000 people. But what would you consider to be your most important job as the CEO?
I suppose setting the vision. I think if you set the vision and the purpose, that's a good starting point. Yeah. I think also trying to be honest with everybody, as honest as you can be. Yeah. I think sometimes you have to make difficult decisions for what's right for the business, and that's a challenge. I think at the end of the day, if you look after the people, they look after the customers. It's a bit of chicken and egg, isn't it? Sometimes you see looking after your customers is the most important, but if you don't look after the people, they won't look after the customers. The headwinds that we've got with staff costs and energy costs and margin pressures and all that just means that it's ever increasing challenge to be able to serve customers in the way that you would want to serve them. Yeah. I think if you look at places like Marks and Spencer's and Tesco, you'll see the use of self-service tills where they've tried to modernise the business to manage the increase in pay on the basis that the model can't afford to just keep having the same number of people serving a smaller number of customers. Yeah. And I think people like Stuart Machin at M&S have done a great job in terms of bringing that along. Stuart Machin's got quite a nice phrase that he uses internally in M&S, which I don't know if you know, it's called positively dissatisfied. Okay. And internally, for externally, M&S looks like they've done a great job, but internally they have this thing about being positively dissatisfied with everything they do. Okay. And I think it's quite a nice way of saying always challenging. Yeah. So, I think it's a real challenge nowadays with all the headwinds to try and balance what feels right from a team point of view and what is right from a business point of view and a customer point of view. So there's that fight between the two. Yeah. I think there's a real challenge in high street locations in terms of making that whole economic model work. Yeah. And I think business rates is an example of an antiquated system that effectively You can have a shop on a high street where you pay no rent and you still pay £100,000 a rate. Yeah. I mean, it's just nuts. So I think hopefully the new government will help. I'm sure that as part of their manifesto, they said they would improve the business rate system. I hope they're true to their word and do something about that.
So what would you say are the best and the worst things about working in the outdoor industry?
I mean, the best thing is that effectively everything we sell is for somebody to go and do something with, isn't it? So we operate in an environment that is free for the end user, more mainly speaking, and therefore, whether or not you're going to walk your dog or you're going to go and climb a mountain, the vast majority of the stuff that happens there is free at source. Yeah. I think probably the worst bit about it is that I think there's a real challenge in terms of the business economics, in terms of the industry. A lot of the stuff that you have to use that is low margin from a retailer point of view, and therefore is challenging. Stock turn is low, margins are low, costs are high, and therefore making that economic model work is a real challenge. So that's the industry. The industry is got to adapt and change a little bit in terms of that. Yeah. I think if you take the best-selling branded jacket in two of the biggest brands, it's the same best-selling jacket today as it was 10 years ago, and therefore that's a need-based purchase, not a want-based purchase. If I asked you what your favourite jacket is, you probably had it 5 years, you probably haven't renewed it, you probably, the other challenge that we've got is the product that we sell. If you take waterproof jackets, doing the right thing for the environment is not necessarily going to create the best product in terms of being fit for purpose. So a worry for me is that people start to believe that the product isn't as good as it used to be because we're treating it with a different chemical, and the chemical is good for the environment, but actually not good for actually doing the job. We're going to end up having to waterproof our jackets every 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever in order to get the right DWR surface that makes the whole thing work properly. So from probably the most challenging part of the industry, I think, in the next 5 years is educating the customer and then trying to come up with a better alternative to what we've currently got. Because currently, I think we're gonna have problems with it.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had a question about sustainability, but you've touched on it exactly to that point, because I think still today, and you would know this much better than me, but my feeling is that, let's say, most consumers are not willing to pay more for something that is more sustainable if they have a choice between the two.
I think that's less now than it used to be. I think more people do care about sustainability now than they used to, and I think you do have to. With all that, you do have to consider what you do with that. I think the challenge with all that is that the product's still got to be fit for purpose. Yeah. So if you take jackets as a key example, if the water repellency that you spray the jacket with doesn't last as long, people will automatically feel like the jacket isn't as good as it used to be. Excuse me. So it's not because the jacket isn't any better. It's not cost any less to make. It's not got any worse material. But the reality is the effectiveness of the jacket will be significantly less than it would have been 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And that, the people that crack that first are the people that are going to win, because over a period of time, making that kit work will be better for the environment. There's an argument to say if people buy more jackets, it's less good for the environment, and if they don't think they're working as well, then we've got a jacket on that we sell from a major brand, And effectively, it's a great jacket, but the reviews online are really poor on the basis that the DWR is not as good as it used to be. And it's a real challenge, that, because it's a very well-known mountain brand, and there's some terrible reviews, and it's not because the jacket's poor, it's just because it needs treating more often.
So looking back over your career, what would you say is the biggest learning you've had coming from a mistake that you made, or a wrong decision or something? Is there something that stands out where you're like, that wasn't good, but...
Rather than give you a specific example, I think the biggest challenge is owning up to your mistakes. Yeah. So I think sometimes you can dig yourself a hole trying to prove a point that, if you step back, and that's where you've got to try and keep yourself honest. So I think the biggest learning is try and keep yourself honest and try and reflect on the decisions you make, as opposed to digging yourself into a hole trying to prove a point that, and we all do it as well. I only this morning I was talking to our commercial director, and we were talking about, we were having a day regarding store locations and strategy and stuff, and he suggested to bring in somebody to it. And I said, the problem with that is that they'll have this view. And he said, yeah, but he said, they will have a tainted view, and they have got a tainted opinion, and it's our job to get them to realise it's a tainted opinion. So I think I think the biggest learning is try and reflect on what you do, and try and reflect on the fact, is it right? And it's difficult, isn't it? Because everybody likes to be right, don't they?
So if you could give future leaders within the sports and the outdoor industry 3 pieces of advice for having a successful career and being able to develop through their career, what piece of advice would you give?
Be honest to yourself. Be driven. It's a competitive landscape, so you've got to really want it. You've got to be driven in terms of that. But lastly, I suppose, just think of the customer. The customer is the bit that, if you lose sight of the customer, you lose sight of everything. And sometimes you have to remind yourself that we're all here to serve the customer, and that is a real challenge sometimes when you're talking to somebody that's allocating stock or creating a piece of point of sale, or whatever it is. Sometimes they lose sight of the fact that actually it's the consumer that is the end result. Whether you've sent too much stock, not enough stock, whether you've ranged the right item, whether you've ranged it wide enough ranges, too wide a range, whether or not it's easy at point of sale, whether or not it's easy to go through the till, whether it's easy putting it out on the shop floor. There's all those things. Sometimes we lose sight of the main reason we're here, and that is to serve customers. So I think if you start from the point of understanding actually the reason we are here is to serve the customer with what they require, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah. I remember reading that, and speaking to him, that Chip Wilson, when they founded Lululemon, I think everybody had to spend maybe not a full day, but I can't remember, it was like a day a week in the store, because to your point, and what you said actually at the start is that, that time in the store and being in retail, you learn so much, and it keeps you grounded and connected with the consumer.
Yeah, we've the guy that runs all our stores, a guy called Steve Bland, he calls it a store fix. Yeah. Whenever he's had a bad time, we need to go and have a store fix. So, and that he runs a bigger store estate, but he can be in Fort William or Newquay. He isn't stuck to the office, and that is a real. It's admirable when you get somebody that's driving that agenda, and he quite often sends dates to people in the office to say, I'm in these stores on these times, does anybody want to join me? So I think we should, like I say, that just not got to lose sight of the customer in terms of, and you'll see in our values and our strategy, the customer's at the heart of everything we do. So we try to be that way anyway. We don't always achieve it, but we try our best.
Yeah, otherwise you said it on, it's the vision, that's the vision that you have as the CEO. So last question. So If today was your last day, if you were like going to hang up your hiking boots and go and full time on your small holding, what would your message be to your team, your leadership team?
Thank you.
Perfect. Great. Simple, clear, to the point, and everything that it needs to be, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I don't really mean it. I'll be back tomorrow. No, but yeah, thank you.
Great. Brilliant. Well, thank you very much, Lee, for your time. It's been great to chat, and thanks for sharing all your insights. I'm sure the audience will definitely appreciate lots of good nuggets in there for sure. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks for your support, and see you soon for the next Sports and Outdoor Mentors episode.